I'm Sophia Hartwell, and I should have seen it coming. My brother Marcus always believed he was entitled to everything just because he was born male. But sitting in the mahogany-paneled office of Peterson and Associates on that gray October morning, watching him gloat over Grandpa's will, I realized he'd finally pushed his luck too far. The Hartwell Ranch, all 2,000 acres, goes to Marcus James Hartwell, the lawyer, Mr. Peterson read in his steady voice. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, his expensive suit stretching across his belly, that smug smile I'd grown to hate spreading across his face. Of course it does, Marcus said, shooting me a sideways glance. The ranch goes to the men, Sophia. That's how it's always been. Women get the jewelry box and keep quiet. I sat perfectly still in my simple black dress, my hands folded in my lap. Around the conference table, my cousins shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed embarrassed by Marcus's arrogance, though not surprised. This was the same brother who'd told me at 12 that girls couldn't run farms, who'd convinced our parents to pay for his business degree while I worked 3 jobs to put myself through agricultural college. Mr. Peterson continued reading. To my granddaughter Sophia, I leave my late wife Margaret's jewelry collection, valued at approximately $50,000, and my personal effects. See, Marcus laughed. Actually laughed out loud in a lawyer's office. Grandpa knew what he was doing. Men handle the real assets. You get some dusty old necklaces. Those dusty old necklaces were Grandma Margaret's prized possessions, pieces her grandmother had brought from Ireland. But to Marcus, anything that didn't have immediate cash value was worthless. The ranch is worth $12 million easy, he continued, already pulling out his phone. I've got developers interested. We can subdivide, sell off parcels. Make a fortune. My heart clenched. The Hartwell Ranch had been in our family for 4 generations. Grandpa had built it from nothing, turning scrubland into productive cattle country. The idea of Marcus selling it to developers who'd turn it into strip malls made me physically ill. But I stayed quiet, because Grandpa had taught me something Marcus never learned. Sometimes you have to let people talk long enough to hang themselves. Mr. Peterson, Marcus said, practically bouncing in his seat. When can we start the property transfer? I want to move fast on this. The elderly lawyer looked at him over his wire-rimmed glasses. Well, there's one more item to address. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed manila envelope, my name written across the front in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. Marcus's smirk faltered slightly. What's that? Your grandfather left specific instructions that this envelope be given to Miss Sophia after the will reading, Mr. Peterson said, sliding it across the polished table to me. My hands shook as I picked it up. The envelope was thick, heavy, like it contained more than just a letter. Marcus leaned forward, his earlier confidence wavering. What could the old man have put in there? He muttered. I broke the seal carefully, my heart pounding. Inside was a letter in Grandpa's careful script, and beneath it, a thick stack of official-looking documents. I read the letter first, my eyes widening with each line. My dear Sophia, asterisk if you're reading this. It means I'm gone and Marcus has just inherited the ranch. Or so he thinks. You see, sweetheart, I've been watching your brother for 30 years, and I know exactly what kind of man he is. The kind who sees dollar signs where others see legacy. The kind who thinks being born male makes him superior to women who've earned their place. Asterisk. Asterisk you, on the other hand, have worked every summer on this ranch since you were 8 years old. You know every acre, every head of cattle, every fence post that needs mending. You studied agriculture in college, while Marcus was partying his way through business school. You're the one who suggested the crop rotation that increased our yield by 40%. You're the one who stayed up nights with me during calving season. Asterisk. Asterisk, so here's what I did 30 years ago, right after Marcus was born and your father started talking about the boy inheriting everything. I created the Hartwell Family Trust. The ranch deed, all mineral rights, water rights, and business assets were transferred into this trust in 1993. What Marcus just inherited is the right to live on the property and work it, but he doesn't own it. The trust does, asterisk. Asterisk, and who controls the trust? Look at the documents, sweetheart. You'll find it very interesting, asterisk. My hands trembled as I set the letter down and picked up the legal documents. Trust agreement, deed transfer, bank statements. And there, in black and white, my name listed as the sole beneficiary and controlling trustee of the Hartwell Family Trust, effective on my 30th birthday, which was 3 months ago. What does it say? Marcus demanded, his voice sharp with worry. I looked up at him, then at Mr. Peterson, who was watching me with knowing eyes. You knew about this? The lawyer nodded. Your grandfather came to me regularly over the years to update the trust documents. He was very specific about his wishes. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. What wishes? What's in that envelope? I stood too, holding the documents against my chest. For the first time in my life, I had power over Marcus, and I was going to savor it. Well, brother, I said, my voice steady and calm. It turns out Grandpa was a lot smarter than you gave him credit for. You just inherited the right to work land that you don't actually own. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I held up the trust documents. The ranch was transferred to a family trust 30 years ago. You inherited tenancy rights, not ownership. And the trust? I smiled. The trust belongs to me. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus stared at the papers like they might bite him, his mouth opening and closing without sound. That's impossible, he finally whispered. Mr. Peterson, I said, turning to the lawyer, would you mind explaining the legal implications? The old man cleared his throat. Certainly. As of 3 months ago, when Miss Sophia turned 30, she became the controlling trustee of all Hartwell family assets. The ranch, the cattle operation, mineral rights, water rights, bank accounts. Everything is held in trust for the family's benefit, with Miss Sophia having final say over all decisions. Marcus grabbed the edge of the table. But the will said, the will gave you the right to live and work on the property, I interrupted, as long as you follow the trust guidelines, which, according to these documents, include maintaining the ranch as a working cattle operation, preserving its historical integrity, and I flipped through the pages, finding the clause that made me smile, treating all family members with respect and equality. This is insane, Marcus said, his voice rising. You can't this has to be illegal. I'll contest it. I'll sue. Mr. Peterson shook his head. The trust was legally established and has been in effect for 3 decades. It's ironclad. Your grandfather was very thorough. Marcus turned to our cousins, who'd been watching this exchange with wide eyes. You guys hear this? She's trying to steal what's rightfully mine. Actually, I said, pulling out another document, according to the trust terms, if any beneficiary attempts to contest the trust or sell family assets against the trustee's wishes, they forfeit all rights to trust benefits, including the right to live on the property. Marcus's face went from pale to red. You're bluffing. I held up my phone. Should I call the sheriff now, or do you want to pack first? Sophia, he said, and for the first time in my life, I heard panic in my brother's voice. Come on. We're family. We can work something out. Maybe we could be co-managers, or the way you wanted to work something out when you told everyone at Dad's funeral that I should find a husband and let the men handle business? I asked. Or the way you wanted to work something out when you tried to convince Grandpa to sell the south pasture to your developer friends? His jaw dropped. How did you? Grandpa told me everything, Marcus. Every conversation, every scheme, every time you called me just the granddaughter when you thought I wasn't listening. I stood up, gathering the documents. But here's what's going to happen now. I walked to the window overlooking Main Street, looking out at the town where 4 generations of Hartwells had lived and worked. Marcus followed, his earlier arrogance completely gone. You can stay on the ranch, I said without turning around. You can work the cattle operation under my supervision. You'll receive a fair salary as ranch manager, not owner-manager. And maybe if you prove you can treat people with respect, if you can learn that being born male doesn't make you superior, we can discuss a partnership. You're serious, he said quietly. I turned to face him. Dead serious. Or you can leave now, and I'll hire someone else to help me run the operation. Your choice. Marcus looked around the room at our cousins, at Mr. Peterson, at the trust documents that had just turned his world upside down. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. I didn't know Grandpa had done this. That's because you never listened to him, I said. You were too busy planning what you'd do with your inheritance to pay attention to what he was actually saying. He used to tell me stories about the ranch, about building something that would last. You heard dollar signs. I heard legacy. Marcus slumped back into his chair. What happens now? I sat back down across from him. The power dynamic in the room completely shifted. Now you learn what it means to work for something instead of expecting it to be handed to you. Now you learn that respect is earned, not inherited. And now you learn that the just a granddaughter you dismissed is the one holding your future in her hands. Mr. Peterson gathered his papers, a slight smile on his weathered face. Miss Sophia, I'll need you to sign some paperwork to officially activate your trustee status, but everything is in order. Your grandfather would be very proud. As we left the lawyer's office, Marcus walked beside me in stunned silence. Outside, the October air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. Sophia, he said finally, I owe you an apology. A lot of apologies. I stopped walking and looked at my brother, really looked at him. Under the expensive suit and the arrogance, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: humility. Yes, you do, I said. But apologies are just words, Marcus. What matters is what you do next. I want to learn, he said quietly. I want to do right by the ranch, by Grandpa's memory. By you. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or false sincerity. But all I saw was a man who'd just realized that everything he'd taken for granted was actually a gift he'd never earned. Okay, I said. We'll try. But Marcus? One more comment about women not deserving inheritance, one more dismissive remark about my abilities, and you'll be looking for a new place to live. Understood? He nodded. Understood. 6 months later, Marcus and I work side by side every day on the ranch. He still struggles with taking direction from his younger sister, but he's learning. The cattle are thriving, we've expanded the organic feed program I developed, and the ranch is more profitable than it's ever been. More importantly, Marcus has started listening. Really listening. To the ranch hands who've worked this land for decades. To the veterinarian who's been caring for our cattle since we were kids. To me, when I explain why sustainable farming practices matter more than quick profits. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when we're checking fences together, he tells me stories about Grandpa that I'd never heard. Stories about how proud Grandpa was of my agricultural degree, how he used to brag to his friends about his granddaughter who understood soil composition and genetics. Stories that Marcus had ignored at the time, but remembered now. The ranch will never be for sale. Not to developers, not to anyone. It's Hartwell land, and it'll stay that way. Because sometimes the best inheritance isn't money or property. It's the lesson that respect, like trust, has to be earned. And that being underestimated can be the greatest advantage of all. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote that will. He gave Marcus what he expected to inherit, and he gave me what I'd actually earned. The difference turned out to be everything.